nuclear race between Nazi Germany and the US.
Every week that passed increased the risk that Nazi scientists were moving closer to unlocking the atom's destructive potential. If that happened before the Allies acted, the war, and perhaps the future of civilization, could be decided before anyone realized what had occurred. The scientists knew they couldn't solve the problem alone. They needed to convince the United States government, a nation that was still officially neutral, that time was running out. But there was one obstacle. Most American politicians had never heard of nuclear fission. Few understood its military potential, and fewer still were likely to take a warning from little-known refugee scientists seriously. They needed someone whose voice could not be ignored. There was only one person with that kind of influence: Albert Einstein. By 1939, Einstein was already the most famous scientist in the world. His name had become synonymous with genius, and his theories had transformed modern physics. Although he was a lifelong pacifist, he also understood the danger posed by Nazi Germany. Like many others, he had fled Europe after Hitler came to power. During the summer of 1939, Szilard and Wigner traveled to meet Einstein at his quiet cottage on Long Island. What began as a simple conversation soon became one of the most consequential meetings in modern history. The scientists explained their fears. Germany possessed brilliant physicists.
Chain reaction is stable, General, but the blast radius is unpredictable.
It had access to uranium, and if Hitler's government invested enough resources, it might become the first nation to build an atomic bomb. Einstein listened carefully. He understood the science, and he understood what was at stake. If their fears were justified, the world had very little time. Together they drafted a letter addressed to President Franklin D. Roosevelt. The message was clear, urgent, and unlike anything an American president had ever received.
The warning had been delivered. The science had been verified. Now, the United States faced a decision unlikely to remind if the SAS were to wait.
It warned that recent scientific discoveries made the construction of extraordinarily powerful bombs possible. It also warned that Germany had already taken steps to secure uranium supplies, suggesting the Nazi regime recognized the strategic importance of nuclear research. The letter did not claim Germany already possessed an atomic bomb. Instead, it warned that waiting for proof could mean waiting until it was too late. On August 2nd, 1939, Einstein signed the letter. Weeks later, it reached the White House. At first, President Roosevelt did not immediately launch a massive weapons program. Instead, he ordered officials to investigate the scientists' claims and evaluate whether such a weapon was truly possible. The answer they received would change history. The science was sound. The threat, while uncertain, was credible, and the consequences of doing nothing were too great to ignore. Roosevelt reportedly summarized the situation with remarkable simplicity. The goal, he believed, was to make sure the Nazis did not build such a bomb first. Those few pages, signed by one of history's greatest minds, became the spark that ignited America's atomic program. What began as a warning letter soon evolved into a small research effort. That research effort would grow into a project so vast, so secret, and so ambitious that it would employ more than 130,000 people, consume billions of dollars, and forever alter the course of human history. The race for the atom had officially begun, and hidden behind layers of secrecy, the United States was about to embark on a mission unlike anything the world had ever seen. The warning had been delivered. The science had been verified. Now the United States faced a decision unlike any in its history. If the scientists were right, America could not afford to wait. Every day lost was another day Nazi Germany might be moving closer to a weapon capable of changing the outcome of the war forever. What began as a small research effort soon transformed into something far more ambitious. By 1942, the United States government made a decision that would remain hidden from the public for years. It would launch the largest secret scientific and engineering project the world had ever seen. Its official name revealed almost nothing. It was simply called the Manhattan Project. The name itself was deliberately misleading. Although much of the work would eventually take place thousands of miles from New York, the project was initially managed by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Manhattan District. To anyone overhearing the name, it sounded like an ordinary military office, not a program that could redefine the future of humanity. Secrecy wasn't just important, it was everything. If even a single critical detail reached enemy intelligence, years of work, and perhaps the entire war effort, could be compromised. The project was placed under the command of General Leslie R. Groves, a tough, demanding military engineer known for completing impossible tasks. Just months earlier, he had overseen construction of the Pentagon, the largest office building in the world. Now he was handed an even greater challenge. His mission was simple to describe: build an atomic bomb before Nazi Germany did. How it would be accomplished was another matter entirely. No nation had ever attempted anything on this scale. Scientists needed laboratories unlike any ever built. Factories had to process materials that existed only in tiny quantities. Machines had to be invented before they could even be assembled. Entire industries had to be created from scratch. And all of it had to happen without revealing the project's true purpose. Congress quietly approved enormous funding. The budget eventually exceeded $2 billion during the war, an amount equivalent to tens of billions in today's money. It became one of the most expensive wartime projects in American history, second only to the cost of fighting the war itself. Yet almost no one outside a small circle of officials knew it existed. The government purchased vast stretches of land in remote parts of the country. Families were told to leave their homes with little explanation. Small communities vanished almost overnight. In their place, entirely new cities began to rise. In eastern Tennessee, forests gave way to the sprawling town of Oak Ridge, where enormous facilities would enrich uranium using technologies so complex that many engineers barely understood the complete process. In the deserts of Washington state, workers constructed the massive Hanford Engineer Works, where nuclear reactors would produce plutonium, an element almost unknown to the public at the time. High on an isolated mesa in northern New Mexico, a quiet boys' boarding school was transformed into one of the most heavily guarded scientific centers in history. It was called Los Alamos. Officially, these were ordinary military installations. In reality, they were pieces of a puzzle that, when assembled, would create the world's first atomic weapon. Construction never stopped. Bulldozers worked through the night. Trains arrived loaded with steel, concrete, copper.
Thousands of laborers poured foundations, erected factories, and built miles of roads almost as quickly as blueprints could be drawn. Within months, empty fields had become bustling communities, schools opened, hospitals welcomed patients, grocery stores stocked their shelves, movie theaters entertained families. To an outsider, these looked like normal American towns, but they were unlike any towns the country had ever seen. Every entrance was guarded identification. Badges were mandatory. Mail was monitored. Conversations were restricted. Visitors were rarely allowed inside. Even married couples working on the project often knew almost nothing about each other's jobs. The government's policy was straightforward.
Everyone would know only what they absolutely needed to know, nothing more. The Compartmentalization was so strict that tens of thousands of workers spent years performing the same task every day without understanding its purpose. A technician might spend an entire shift turning the same valve. An engineer might maintain a single machine. A secretary might type reports filled with code names and numbers. Few ever asked questions. Fewer still received answers. Many believed they were simply helping manufacture conventional military equipment. Some assumed they were producing fuel. Others thought they were working on advanced radar or explosives. Only a handful of scientists and senior military officers understood the true objective. Even Vice President Harry Truman, who would later authorize the bomb's use after becoming president, was unaware of the project's existence until he assumed office following President Roosevelt's death in April 1945. The level of secrecy was unprecedented. At its peak, the Manhattan Project employed more than 130,000 people across dozens of facilities throughout the United States and Canada. Yet despite its enormous workforce, its greatest secret remained intact. The outside world knew almost nothing. Not even many members of Congress realized billions of dollars were being poured into an operation hidden behind layers of military security. It was one of history's greatest acts of organized secrecy. But buildings, money, and security alone could not unlock the atom. The project still needed something far more valuable. Needed the brightest scientific minds on Earth. Some had fled fascist Europe, others came from America's leading universities. Many were pioneers whose discoveries had already transformed modern physics. Now, they would be brought together in one isolated location, where they would attempt to solve a problem no human being had ever solved before. And standing at the center of that extraordinary gathering was a brilliant, enigmatic physicist, whose name would become forever linked with the birth of the atomic age.